We're back and welcome, I suppose, to our latest LinkedIn Live, in which I can't believe I'm doing this. I've got better things to do. I really do. I can't believe that we're doing this, Maria. How you communicate makes a difference in your chances of getting your paper accepted. Maria, I mean, how are you doing today? You all right?
Ever positive, ever fresh.
Just messing around. Welcome back, everybody, to our latest LinkedIn Live. And Maria didn't know I was going to do that, so we got her at the start of this event. But the point is how you communicate, not just in presentations like this, but when you talk to editors, you talk to peer reviewers, you manage the progress of your article through a journal submission system can have a big effect on your article's chances of success. And as usual, for this LinkedIn Live, you can put your comments in the chat. I am joined by my good friend Maria. How are you doing today, Maria? Everything okay?
Yes, the sun is shining. The depressions have been lifted. It's not raining.
Would you agree with my opening statement, though, in your experience as an editor, dealing with manuscripts, dealing with authors, how you make people feel when you write different stages of the production process for your paper can influence the outcome of your article, right?
Of course, that means that either people are going to reply to you in the same way or with the same kind of energy, or they're just going to ignore you.
And we're going to talk about different stages of the publication process in this LinkedIn Live event, brought to you, of course, by SciTrain. If you've got questions, if you're listening to this event in the recording, on the playback, you can, of course, give us comments on the LinkedIn feed. We'll answer them anyway. But if you're listening to this event live, do give us feedback in the LinkedIn comments. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you with your publication process. But Maria and I, both doing lots of editing, managing journals, talking to researchers, talking to editors and peer reviewers, all round this hamster wheel, the SciTrain hamster wheel of success, all the way around from ideas, funding, journal selection, paper writing, submission, peer review, and publication. But as Maria will tell you, all of these different steps are important for the success of your paper, right, Maria?
Yes. So from the first time you have an idea of what you want to do, most of the early career researchers don't really think about funding, but it's important to get funding for you to get the resources to do the experiments that you need to do, or to go collect the samples that you need to do, or have time just to think about things. And the way that you communicate that is different from the way that you'll communicate a research paper, from the way that you'll write a research paper, and from the way that you'll present it at a conference, because it's for a different audience. It's for people that know a bit about what you do, but are more interested in the practical outcomes of that and why they should invest time and money into that. So you need to find what it is that you want to answer. That is the problem that a lot of people have been looking into.
And what we're going to do in this quick LinkedIn Live event today is we're going to go through the publication cycle, give you some examples of the way that people often communicate with their paper at different stages, how that can be a problem, and give you some suggestions for how you could be communicating instead, in order, of course, to give your article a better probable chance of acceptance, which starts really at the beginning of the process. And we often get letters like this back from editorial offices, right, Maria? After that initial submission or that initial pre-submission inquiry, which we're going to talk about in a moment, it's not so great to get these kinds of messages back from journals, right?
No, it's not. And nowadays, a lot of journals have standardized email templates that they'll just rearrange and send you things, and that is for a reason. It's because people need to be clear and accurate and precise on what they're talking about. And for instance, in this example, nothing here is rude. It's just not very nice.
I think this is something that a lot of researchers maybe don't realize. They think that they're talking directly to the editor, especially at early stages of the manuscript submission process. When the reviews come back, for example, you look at the email that you've gotten from the editor, he or she hasn't actually written that email. Often it's been auto-generated, auto-populated by the submission system based on buttons that the editor or the editorial team are going to be clicking there behind the scenes. So often the way that you respond depends upon the kind of email that you get, the kind of format of the email that you get. But, you know, what you do from the earliest stages of your submission process, even before you make a submission, can really help your article's chances of acceptance. And we've been involved in writing, or helping authors to write, I should say, some pre-submission inquiries recently, right, Maria? How can you do it?
You need to find the email address to contact. You need to be aware of the author guidelines, and you need to have a specific question and leave it to one question per email so that people know what they're answering you and you have a quick response.
This is a really great strategy. People often ask us, like, how can we speed up our articles processing time? How can we increase our researchers' chances of success, chances of successful publication? One great tip is to go for a pre-submission inquiry. You can actually do this with as many journals as you like, right, Maria? There's no limit on the number of pre-submission inquiries that a researcher can make to journals.
No, not really. And it's often about what you would like to aim for, and whether or not what you've researched is within the scope and interest and the target audience of the journal that you're writing about. And if you have any questions on word count limits and what you should write in each section and whether the journal allows for supplementary information, then ask all that once you've had the first contact and you've written to the editor to say, I have a paper that I'm writing about this with this provisional title. Would you be interested in publishing it?
Exactly. That's the key. That's the key. You've done the research. You know what the takeaway is. You know what the key message is from that research. Why not write to a number of different editors at different journals that you might be targeting and ask them if they would be interested in potentially seeing your paper for peer review? Why not do it? Because you've got nothing to lose. We'll be happy to give you some templates for doing just that. If you drop us a comment in the LinkedIn comment section or email us or DM us on LinkedIn after the event, we'll give you a template. You've got nothing to lose, right, Maria? I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
Well, the worst that can happen is that a couple of journals will not reply to you. Some will tell you that they're not really interested because they've published a lot on that subject in the past year. And others will say that we are actually interested. We like your different takes. So you have then a choice of how you're going to proceed with the writing of your paper.
You may end up with several options, which is great. And if you do this, if you communicate positively with the editor about what you've got to send the journal, when you do make the submission, you're going to be a little bit ahead of the game because, of course, the editor may remember you from the pre-submission inquiry, right, Maria? It's that getting through that first stage, editorial triage, bit like getting hit by a bus. You get rushed to the hospital, your paper gets rushed to the editorial office. What are they going to consider when they think about sending it out for peer review or not?
Don't do that. Don't get hit by a bus. That wasn't a good analogy. Gareth, come on. Getting a paper accepted or pre-accepted, or maybe it will be accepted, is not getting hit by a bus. You may be as blindsided as that, or a bit dazed and confused, but that just means you have to write the thing now.
I need to work on my analogies. But what are desk editors going to be looking at when they get your paper rushed into the editorial office for the first time?
Well, they're going to remember that you said you were going to write about a subject and that your paper is going to be about that subject, so you better make it about what you said you were going to do. And if they were particularly interested about it, they may put you in the top of the pile, so to speak, and provide you with some feedback. Even if your paper goes to peer review and gets rejected after peer review, you will probably still get some feedback because you've put in the effort of communicating with the editorial office beforehand.
The goal here is to get your paper sent out for peer review. And as you probably know, at those big journals, Nature, Science, the rejection rate is 9 out of 10. 90% of papers that get submitted don't make it out for peer review. So communicating your message in your initial article submission is very, very important in order to get your paper through peer review, right, Maria? Having a clear message when you communicate about your research is critical.
Very clear, and usually just one. Keep it to one. We are simple people. We like to know that what you've done answers one question, and that is enough. If the question is important enough, then that is enough.
That's cognitive bias. We've talked about that a lot before. You get really close to your research. You know that there's lots of really important things to say, but you're going to then make the mistake of confusing people like editors with your cover letter, with your article itself, if you go all over the place and start talking about too many things. So really important to have an initial clear message at the outset. And what about preprint servers? We can use those as well to communicate our research, right, Maria?
Yes, and they are quite important, especially if it's research that's been going on for a long time. And if it involves different people from different places. For instance, I just had a paper accepted in a journal recently from work I've done in 2016, I think.
Wow, congratulations. I wasn't even born in 2016.
Of course not, Gareth. You're 8 right now. So it's important to have that, well, preprint servers as well for research that carries on for that long period of time or even longer. It's important to have that kind of say out there in conferences and preprint servers, just basically to say, I have done this, so please don't go and repeat it, because we have already done these experiments and we have shown something. So if you want to now show something completely different, you have to cite us.
Yeah, we see a lot of chit chat about the use of blockchain, about the use of blockchain related technology for researchers these days. But in fact, it's kind of been around for many, many years in the form of preprint platforms. Like as Maria said, if you do something, write an abstract, give a talk, put something even down on paper about a piece of research, you should preprint it, because that stamps it with a CC license, with a DOI, document object identifier, puts your priority in place. And of course, you'll want to communicate that when you talk to a journal. And that brings us on to this really important step. In order to make a submission, in order to be sure that you're tied to your research, an ORCID ID is a good idea, right, Maria?
Yes, it's a very good idea. And although it's not completely fail-proof, it is quite good that people rely within the researcher community rely on these kinds of platforms to make sure that they are who they are. We often, as researchers, change affiliation, we move countries, we move job titles, we move universities, but hopefully we will keep research lines. So you will have a way to people to know that you are, as a researcher, interested in this kind of field. So that's what makes you accountable for what you publish. And if you have a website that you don't have to pay for, that tells everyone the list of your publications, what you're interested in, the abstracts that you published, you can upload to ORCID abstracts, conference conference posters, peer reviews. It's really good to have people know what you're interested in.
Another kind of blockchain, really. I mean, shout out to our friends at the Orchid Foundation. I'm sure the check's in the mail, but this is a great way to communicate to your contemporaries, to other researchers around what you're doing. I mean, to use an English example, loads of people called Smith in the United Kingdom. I'm not sure about the Portuguese equivalent, but how do you differentiate yourself if that's your name? And how do people find you, more importantly? How do people know which John Smith is the John Smith that they want to talk to about the great research that you've just done?
Exactly. It's very important. There are a lot of people publishing papers with Maria Machado, and they're not all me.
Wouldn't it be great if they were, wouldn't it? Like you
No,
could just
they're not.
take, you know, anyway. I mean, have a look. It's important, this kind of communication. Let's get into the manuscript submission process then, because this is critical. What about that cover letter, Maria? This is where you start to communicate about your research as you make the submission to that journal, right? This is where you have the chance to sell your work to the editor. And you may have made a pre-submission inquiry. You may have pre-printed. So the editor, she or he may be aware of you and your research already, but now comes the cover letter.
And this is not just a copy and paste job from your abstract, right? It doesn't really matter because they will have access to it. They'll read the abstract if they're interested. They will have access to the preprint if they're interested. So here, what you really want to say in your cover letter is why the readers of your journal will be interested in reading this research, what it does to the field, what it advances, what is unique, what is original, what is important, why you started out doing this in the first place. Nobody wants to do something that people have already done before if your goal is not to reproduce someone's work, right? So just make it perfectly clear what you wanted to answer. This is a very broad audience. So editors are usually within your field, but they may not be within the very narrow subject area that you're specializing in. So it is important to tell them why it is key for the readers in their journal to read this.
I've been a journal editor for more than 20 years, even before 2016, as Maria was just pointing out a moment ago. Many editors, take it from me, they read the abstract and the cover letter when the paper comes in to the editorial office. And you don't want to waste the opportunity of the cover letter. Something boring, like, please consider this paper for publication in your esteemed journal, or indeed something like this, because you want to maximize your chances of success. As Maria said, why is the topic important? Why are the results significant? What's the key? What's the advance? What's the breakthrough? This is the worst kind of cover letter, right, Maria? We see lots of authors who don't bother with this at all.
I think that authors are usually quite burnt out by the end of writing a whole paper.
Exactly.
They don't want to write anymore. But it is different. It is a different kind of writing exercise. It's not writing for your peers. It's writing for someone who is in between. It's interested in the work that you do, but is also interested in figuring out how they're going to advance the wider field. So think about, why are people at the breakthrough? What are people in the breakthrough of your field doing that you could contribute to?
We get to the end of that submission process. The little box pops up on Scholar One, on Editorial Manager. Please upload your cover letter. I've been there. You know, you're just like, I can't be bothered. I just want to go down the pub or out of the office. And so you write something like this. Dear editor, please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. It's a waste of this opportunity. What you really want is something a bit more like this, right, Maria? Something compelling, a good cover letter. We're going to give you a template after the event. Maria.
Well, see, you really have to place your research in the context of wider research, why it's interesting, and why it would be important for that journal to be associated with this research. Journals want to be cited. That's what their whole purpose is right now. If you go through the metrics, and if a lot of people still go through the metrics, then what really matters for editors is how many times an article that they've published is cited by other researchers. And that is where you have, in the cover letter, is where you have your chance to tell them, this is what we have done, and this is why people will be interested in citing us.
Drop us a comment in the LinkedIn and we'll send you these templates. They're absolutely fantastic. All you've got to do is put in some information about your paper, edit them a little bit, and send them off to your journal. Communication made easy with our team at SciTrain. But the most important point, as Maria will tell you, about communicating with editors is polite and positive writing, polite and positive emails, because you'd be amazed, appalled at the number of nasty comments we do get like these.
Well, yes, people get frustrated. People are people. And it's very important for authors to have recognition of their work. They often think that the doing of the research, the experiments, the writing of the paper is the hard bit. And then they're not very keen to wait around for someone else to go and corroborate that they've done the actual right thing. But this is what peer review is all about. So if you don't have communication from the other side, you can ask for it politely, just don't throw your frustrations at other people.
No teddies in the corner, no toys out of the pram. Give the editor back something that they can use. Dear editor, I'd like to ask if I can do anything to help you speed up the process of my paper. Can I make some suggestions for additional peer reviewers? Is a great approach to this particular problem. And the same goes for responses to the comments that you get back after peer review. And I know Maria's an expert on peer review comments, good and bad peer review comments, responses to peer review comments from authors, Maria.
So a lot of the times, authors will say that the reviewer actually completely misunderstood what my paper is all about, and they think that that's actually the reviewer's fault because they don't know enough, they're not within the field enough, maybe they just don't like you. And actually, if they have a point, if that's not a case of bad peer review, then that's actually the author's fault. If they misunderstood your point, then you need to make your point clearer, because that's your job, to communicate what you're saying and completely, and remove all blocks, remove all equivocal, all ambiguity, make perfectly clear that what you're saying can only be interpreted in a small number of ways. And whenever reviewers ask for more experiments or additional experiments or experiments to corroborate something, don't say that you do not have the data or you cannot do the experiments. It may even be true, it probably is, but just say that maybe it's not, it's out of scope for that kind of research that you're doing. And it will be, acknowledge it as a limitation, say you will do something about it in future.
Absolutely. But being positive, staying positive. Thank you for the valuable comments. Thank you for the time that you spent working on my paper. They've significantly enhanced the quality of my work. Even if you don't believe that, it's still going to make people feel good about your paper if you write that kind of thing. And we've got some good and bad examples from our experience at SciTrain here on the slide. But be positive. Thank people. Make people feel good about your responses that you receive in peer review. We would like to thank the 2 reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. This kind of thing is good to do when you respond to peer review comments. Make it clear to the editor, right, Maria, that you have taken care of all of those comments even the tiny ones, even the mini ones.
Yes, and never forget that reviewers are there doing work, and often unpaid, a lot of the time unpaid, and they're giving up their time in the hopes that you would do the same to their work as well. So that means that you have to talk to them in the way that you would like people to talk to you as well, because you will probably be in that position in the future.
Thank you for the insightful comments, the accurate comments. We have corrected our paper throughout. What you do is you make a document that goes through the review comments, interspersing the review comments with your comments on those comments, your changes to those comments. And if you make it look comprehensive, the editor, the peer reviewers are going to think that you've done all of the changes. Of course you have, right? Wink, wink. But a comprehensive document is a good idea in terms of communication, going back to the journal, going back to the editor. If you put other people in a good mood, they're going to think, well, I did devote quite considerable time. I have given Maria some amazing insights on her work. Thank you very much for recognizing that. They feel good. They're likely to give you a thumbs up for the final acceptance. And again, drop us comments on LinkedIn, DM us. We'll send you some templates like this one in order to help you make revisions next time you've got an article going through peer review. But what about this critical issue, Maria? What happens if your paper's taking too much time? When should I write to an editor to ask for an update?
That heavily depends on your research field. That depends on whether your research is in between two fields. If it is something that you think has a time limit to be published. And all of those things are parameters that you have to take into account when you think about who is reviewing your paper, what other commitments they have, and whether or not they will have enough time. Because what you don't want is to have someone that reviews your paper really, really fast, but then doesn't really get it at all, and the editor acknowledging and supporting that decision. You want someone to review your paper that does a good, thorough job, not someone that just does meh.
Now, we talked about some examples of this kind of communication earlier in our event today. You need to wait for an appropriate amount of time, right? Like doing a job interview. At the end of the job interview, you ask, when would I expect to hear back? To give them the opportunity to tell you how much time to wait before you start harassing them for an answer, right? So if you write too soon to a journal editor in too aggressive a way, that's not going to be a good thing for the potential outcome of your study. So how then should I deal, Maria, lastly, with when my paper gets rejected? What should I do in this kind of situation, communicating with an editor?
You will, if your paper gets rejected after it has gone for peer review, it's because the editor would like something like that in their journal or the subject field, but maybe you just don't have enough experiments, or maybe your conclusions are not fully supported by what you were saying. So be mindful of the feedback that the reviewers provided and try to redesign your study and think and ask the editor if they would consider a submission, not a resubmission, but an original submission from scratch. Just rewrite your paper.
As we talk about in lots of our content, often journals make what are called soft rejections. So they're actually inviting you to go back to them with a resubmission. And just lastly, don't add authors to papers once they've been accepted, because this is something that journal editors really, really hate. And this is a real example of an email that I received in the editorial office at the journal that I work on. We've made some minor modifications and we've added 2 more authors. That raises a number of red flags for journals, right, Maria, in terms of ethics in particular?
Yes. So if they've just done minor modifications, it means that probably no further experimental or lab work or even work in writing, design, statistics, analysis has been done. So why add 2 more authors? Why weren't they there before? There is a whole list of tasks that authors have to do to become authors, to be considered authors, and those are in a website called Credit. So go and look it up, and if the authors have not done that, then you'll have a very hard time justifying why you've added 2 more people.
Which brings us to the end of our event today, and this has been a Sidetrain LinkedIn Live brought to you by Maria and me, Gareth. Thank you so much for joining us. Do put any comments and feedback in the LinkedIn chat, and do let us know about future topics that you'd like us to touch upon in these events. Maria, have a great afternoon. Great to see you. Take care, everybody, and talk to you soon.